As many of you know, the San Diego County Police Chiefs Association and the Sheriff's Association has been in the process of crafting a policy for the appropriate release of video in officer-involved shooting cases. In support of that, we've been meeting with various groups to solicit input. As the process continues, we'll be hosting town hall meetings to allow public feedback. Okay, thank you. The first town hall meeting will be held next week, Wednesday, May 11th, 6 o'clock at the Jacobs Center on the second floor. And the second one will be held on May 17th at 6:30 at Cherokee Point Elementary School. And I hope that you'll put these up on your websites so that we encourage people to come. In the meantime, the District Attorney's Office continues its review of several of the pending officer-involved cases. The length of an agency's investigation of a OIS, or officer-involved shooting case, and our office's subsequent review varies depending on several factors, including the complexity of the shooting incident. We recognize that in the past, law enforcement investigations and the DA took a long time to complete these reviews. Sheriff Gore, Chief Zimmerman, and all of the police chiefs in the county are committed to expediting these reviews, keeping in mind, though, the integrity of the process is, of course, the most important. Even though the video release policy has not yet been finalized, law enforcement in this county agrees it should be the practice in most situations to release pertinent video officer-involved shooting cases whenever possible. The position represents a major departure from historical practices, but we recognize that times have changed. The legal rights of all the parties involved have to be protected, but balanced against the public's desire to view the kind of video evidence. We know that there are situations, though, that might not be appropriate or responsible to release the body-worn cameras. And as prosecutors, of course, we have a legal duty and ethical duty not to do anything that would jeopardize the integrity of a case, investigation, or prejudice a potential criminal investigation or criminal case. However, we know we live in a world where all kinds of video evidence is becoming more and more prevalent as everybody uses their iPhones and Androids and tablets, and they can go viral in minutes. But presented out of context, a video clip alone can lead to incorrect and sometimes inflammatory narratives about shootings. With context, though, video evidence can aid the public in understanding why and how an officer-involved shooting did occur and build public trust in law enforcement. The District Attorney's Office has completed a review of several officer-involved shootings, and several other ones are nearing completion. And starting with this OIS briefing, we will begin to release OIS review letters that have been completed, along with the relevant video evidence connected to those reviews. Although the official video release policy hasn't been defined or drafted, we're beginning the process of part of law enforcement's commitment to transparency. We also don't want to delay any more the release of these completed letters and their associated videos. I want to note, though, that the video evidence and the letters are exempt under the California Public Records Acts, but our decision to release it does not otherwise waive any of the privileges that exist. We don't plan to release any additional evidence from the investigatory materials at this time and continue to claim the privileges we are entitled to under the law. Of course, we got that from our lawyers. As we work through the best and most responsible way to release this material, we expect to get feedback in the process and a public reaction, including from you. And we can evaluate the consequences of releasing the video evidence. This is really new territory, and in many ways a test of how we might proceed in the future. Our ultimate goal is to have a video release policy that serves the public interest and preserves individual rights. Because so many of San Diego County's law enforcement are now wearing body cameras, we expect that these officer-involved briefings and the release of this kind of video to the media may become more frequent. That means, depending on what the media chooses to show, the public will actually begin to see the gritty and often dangerous reality that officers encounter when they're on patrol. They may also see the extent that video cameras on police officers capture citizens, many of whom are struggling with mental health issues or drug addiction, and in some of their most troubled moments. Obviously, these videos can be graphic and disturbing to watch. You, the media, should shoulder the responsibility for what portions of the video are ultimately broadcast and posted, given your own ethical and legal considerations and your responsibility to recognizing community standards. In our view, the media has a duty to put these videos in the context of the evidence, not just to post them. The community will have the ability to weigh the videos alongside every piece of evidence in our review, which provides a more complete picture of what happened. Some officer-involved shooting incidents may have actually several videos connected to them. We're only releasing, though, videos that are relevant to the analysis regarding the shooting. So, in other words, the videos that show what happened moments before or minutes leading up to the shooting. The videos are only edited in the following ways. First, the faces of officers, witnesses, and the person that are shot are blurred out to respect their privacy. Second, in general, the video will stop once the individual who shot is no longer in immediate danger and no more shots are being fired. We're doing that out of respect for the family and the friends of the individuals who have been lost, so that they are not repeatedly exposed to seeing their loved one in a way that is so disturbing and often posted online. By law, families of these individuals who have been shot have a federal right to privacy to control regarding public dissemination of their family members' death images. The right, though, is balanced against the public interest in disclosing whether law enforcement has acted in a legally justified manner during one of these OISs. It's further balanced by a legitimate government interest in providing evidence to the public that supports the finding that law enforcement actions were legally justified. And third, you may find that as we play the videos, we will sometimes circle weapons or positions of individuals so they're more clearly identifiable to the viewer. Other than those three exceptions, the videos are not edited at all. You'll find that some of the videos that are taken are from high-quality cameras, but some of them aren't from the best angles. There are limitations as to what body-worn camera can capture. That's just the nature of the evidence we're able to obtain with these cameras. In other cases, a scene will be shown very clearly. Today, we're releasing 3 officer-involved shooting review letters. Based on the circumstances, the evidence, and the law, the District Attorney's Office review shows the decisions of the officer to shoot in all these incidents were reasonable and they bear no criminal liability for their actions. When I go over the video, I'll briefly summarize first the facts and evidence from the incidents and then show the associated videos. Any broadcast outlets that may be live streaming, and I know some of you are, or broadcasting this news conference live are advised of the graphic nature of these videos and photographs. Once this press event concludes, though, copies of the letters and the videos will be made available in the back of the room. And I just want to remind you that the purpose of the DA's office review of officer-involved shootings is to provide an independent review and to assure the public that peace officers in San Diego County are performing their duties in a legally justified manner. In other words, we're just looking at it from a standpoint, is there criminal liability? Our review does not examine such issues as compliance with the policies and procedures of any of the law enforcement agencies, ways to improve training, or any issues that are related to civil liability. There are other groups that address those issues. The first incident is the fatal shooting of Mr. Lamontes Jones by 2 San Diego police officers. The incident took place on a busy afternoon in the gas lamp and was witnessed by multiple individuals. An officer made contact with Jones after he committed a traffic violation, crossing against a red light. Jones refused to show any identification and walked away from the officer, then ran onto F Street. The motorcycle officer followed Jones, who walked into the middle of the street after dropping his backpack at the curb. Jones turned diagonally and faced the officer. The officer saw Mr. Jones holding a gun. Mr. Jones raised the gun, pointing it at the officer. Standing behind his motorcycle, the officer fired 1 round, striking Jones. A second officer then arrived on the scene. That's when Jones sat up and pointed the gun again in the direction of the first officer. Both officers opened fire. As part of the investigation, a multitude of witnesses were interviewed. Numerous witnesses saw that Mr. Jones had a gun in his hand and pointed it at an officer. Many witnesses praised the officers for their actions and said they protected the citizens who were on the street in surrounding businesses. At least 13 witnesses heard the officers shout at Jones to drop the firearm. Following the shooting, it was determined, though, that Mr. Jones was on probation after being convicted of voluntary manslaughter. An active arrest warrant had been issued in connection with an armed robbery, and he was flagged as potentially armed and dangerous. The investigation was done by the San Diego Police Department, and it determined that Mr. Jones pointed a replica pistol at the officer. It didn't have any markings on it that would indicate that it was a replica. I'm going to show you the photo of the replica Jones was holding next to a real gun of similar size. Hard to tell. The replica gun is on the left. Our review shows that both officers reasonably believed they needed to shoot in self-defense or in the defense of the others that were in the area. There's no body-worn camera video for this event. The first officer had been wearing a body-worn camera for 3 weeks, but did not turn it on, saying in his statement that he did not have time to do so. The second officer also did not activate his body-worn camera, explaining in his statement that he was more focused on stopping the immediate threat to the other officer and to the public. However, portions of the incident were captured on surveillance video from a nearby business and private citizen cell phone videos, which we are releasing today. The first video is surveillance from a business, as is often the nature of surveillance video. There are portions that the video skips frames and appears to jump, but these jumps are not edits. Here we're going to show you a still frame showing Mr. Jones pointing the gun at the officer. You can see Mr. Jones in the middle of the street and the officer behind the truck. The next video was captured by a motorist who was sitting at a red light, and it begins after the initial firing of shots and captures Mr. Jones sitting up and pointing what the witnesses believe to be a real gun at the officer. And here's a still image from that video showing Mr. Jones raising the gun and pointing it at the officer. The final video we are releasing is another citizen's cell phone video from an upstairs window It captures the final volley of shots fired at Mr. Jones, who is still in reaching distance of the gun. At the end, you could hear someone say he might still shoot again. Here is a still frame showing the gun within Mr. Jones's reach. Officers observed him to continue moving at this moment. As I mentioned, there are several more details contained in the letter, and we'll be providing them to you. So now we have a second incident. The second incident we're discussing today is a non-fatal shooting that occurred in Point Loma and involved Michael John Taylor. The San Diego Regional Fugitive Task Force and San Diego police officers were attempting to apprehend Mr. Taylor in the parking lot of a Ramada Inn. Taylor was wanted for a series of burglaries and for driving a stolen Mazda. Taylor was parked in the hotel lot in a stolen Volkswagen Jetta. A deputy U.S. Marshal in an unmarked police vehicle stopped his car to the right of Mr. Taylor's car and turned on his emergency lights in an attempt to pin him in. At the same time, a San Diego police officer entered the parking lot, activated his lights, and also stopped to the left rear of Mr. Taylor's car. As officers closed in, Taylor backed in between and into the unmarked U.S. Marshal's vehicle that was positioned behind him. Taylor then continued backing up and rammed into the passenger side of the San Diego police officer's police car, narrowly missing the officer who re-entered his car to avoid being hit. The officer got out of his car again using the passenger door and gave orders to Taylor to stop. All three peace officers ordered Taylor to shut off his car's engine and surrender. One officer even tried breaking the driver's side window to get the suspect out of the car, but was unsuccessful. A second U.S. Marshal's vehicle arrived on the scene and rammed his car into the passenger side of Mr. Taylor's car. At that point, Mr. Taylor accelerated forward and struck one of the officers in the legs, pushing him backwards. The officer drew his weapon and fired 4 times from the front of the hood of the car coming at him. Officers and other task force members removed Mr. Taylor from the car, rendered medical aid, and called for medical assistance. The injured officer was transported to the hospital and treated for minor injuries. Mr. Taylor was subsequently charged with personal use of a deadly weapon and assault with a deadly weapon on a police officer. He was convicted and sentenced for this and other crimes to 9 years in state prison. Our review shows the officer reasonably believed and he needed to shoot in self-defense and defense of others. The events were captured on a parking lot video camera. This incident unfolds very quickly, so you'll see the video first in real time, followed by a slow motion video. And then there is a still frame from the video showing the officer being struck and pushed back by Mr. Taylor's car. The officer is circled and he is poised over the hood of the car as the car is accelerating forward. The third letter we are releasing today is the fatal shooting of Mr. Dennis Fiel. That's F-I-E-L. San Diego police officers initiated pursuit of a vehicle for speeding and unsafe movements. During the chase, the vehicle description was broadcast on the police radios, and information was relayed that the vehicle was possibly related to a series of shootings that were under investigation. The vehicle evaded officers and was found unoccupied. Mr. Fiel was seen walking in the area and fled from police when contacted. He went into the area of a shrubbery and removed a handgun from his backpack. He then fired several rounds at one of the officers, which struck a building behind the officer. the two officers returned fire, striking Field several times. It was subsequently determined that the officer who had been in foot pursuit of Field was unintentionally struck by a round fired by a fellow officer. In his statement, one officer said that Mr. Field was about 20 to 25 feet away from him when the officer saw him take a semi-automatic pistol from his backpack. They made eye contact with each other, and the officer saw the muzzle flash from Field's gun. The officer heard the rounds passing by his head and started firing back because he believed he was going to get shot. Field was still moving and in control of the weapon. The two officers were concerned that Field would continue shooting, so they fired additional rounds until they felt there was no longer an immediate threat. The second officer arrives on the scene after Field fired the initial shots. He stated he saw Mr. Field running and reaching into his backpack, but lost sight of him when he went behind the bush. The officer saw Field emerge from the bush, extending the gun outwards. The officer yelled at him to, quote, "Get down on the ground, get down on the ground." Field began firing again toward the officer, and the officer returned fire. Only one of the officers was wearing a body-worn camera. The other officers had not yet been issued cameras. The suspect cannot be seen in the body-worn camera in this incident. This is sometimes the nature of body-worn cameras. They capture audio, but may not be positioned or aimed in the direction where the action is actually taking place. In this case, the suspect is obstructed by the shrubbery, but you'll hear audio of the incident as it unfolds, including a police radio broadcast that Mr. Field is reaching into his bag. So in addition to the videos, we're providing you with copies of the 3 letters that our office delivered to the respective agencies summarizing our review of these incidents. The letters contain many more details about the facts of the evidence and why we reached our conclusion not to file criminal charges. I encourage the media outlets to include the letters alongside any videos that they may post. And in ending, after seeing the videos, what I want to do is give you an analogy. In football, for those of you that watch football, a referee makes a call, and sometimes there are different views of that incident. And the referee has to make a split-second call on that. May be different from the other video's views because they're taken from different angles. But there are no second takes, no ability to review those instantaneously, and the officer has to make a split-second decision.